All right. So let's get started. This is the latest for the Orlando Tech Community's tenX Talk series. So just a reminder, we've been starting up this series primarily as a way to kind of help educate and help stimulate a lot of the innovation economy throughout Central Florida. We've had fireside chats with founders, we've had specific education topics. Um, Actually, next month we have Foley, one of the leading law firms in the area, doing kind of a term sheet legal 101 type overview primarily for some of the early stage companies in the area. So this is all through Orlando Tech Community. Of course, if you're not a member, we encourage everyone to look into membership to join OTC. And then just quickly, this is Ken Hall. I'm chair for startup and growth initiatives for OTC, principal at Deep Work Capital, which is a early stage venture firm in the area, and I will be your humble moderator for today. Today we're joined by Racquel Asa, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of Beep. She's a proven communications executive. She's been in kind of the communications marketing space for over 15 years. She's a business leader and advisor and has helped a lot of the marketing efforts with Beep, but also a lot of the stakeholder engagement, communications with elected leaders, community members, first responders, handling a lot of PR and marketing strategies. So we're really happy to have Racquel here, and maybe we'll just start with a softball question. For those that don't know, what is Beep?
I appreciate the softball question right off the bat, but happy to have deeper discussions as well, as we go through this next 45 minutes here. But excited to be here. I love everything about Central Florida. This is home to me. So when I say this is home to me, I've raised my family here. I have two kids here who are Florida grown, Central Florida born. And for me to see the tech scene grow over the last couple of years when I covered it as a journalist, and now here in the tech startup space, has been absolutely amazing and phenomenal. And quite frankly, Ken, a lot of that is work that you do along with your group and many others under the umbrella here. So congrats literally on the footprint. I can tell you, being that, we are a national organization, but we started here in Central Florida. A lot of people have said to us, Orlando is doing some amazing things in the tech scene. And I never thought that would be something I would hear, but it's something we're hearing across the country. So just know that this is not just focused in Central Florida. A lot of people are now looking to Central Florida and the state for this type of emerging technology. So to answer your softball question, what is Beep? Who are we and what do we do? So we're a services company for autonomous shuttles and mobility networks. One of the really cool parts is that we started here in Orlando in the master plan community of Lake Nona with one route and two shuttles. So I've been with the organization for about 4 years now. We just celebrated 5 years of when we filed, but I've been here since day one when we started operations and services and that software development to enable autonomous vehicles and shuttles for shared mobility, if you will. So what does that mean? I'll tell you what it doesn't mean, because I think one of the things that we really have a challenge with is differentiating where we fit within the autonomous vehicle market. And if you're a startup, my best piece of advice to you is to make sure you differentiate yourself and to tell people how you're different and why. So for us, this is how we're different and why. So we focus specifically on the back end software and enablement for these vehicles, because at the end of the day, when you look at the vehicles, we want to partner with amazing organizations who are building the shuttles to enable the autonomous drive systems. The best analogy I always give is when you fly an airplane, you don't say I'm flying a Boeing 747 to Washington, D.C., say I'm flying Delta. So Beep essentially is the Delta, the American Airlines for autonomous vehicles and shuttles. because we provide what we call the service governance and management of those vehicles to make sure that it is providing purpose for all the communities where we're deploying the software and these mobility networks. We work with public and private sector, which is an amazing mix for us. So when I mean public and private, we've done projects with the federal government, with Yellowstone National Park, all the way over to master plan communities, which are private communities, right? Master plan communities that typically don't receive public money. So they look at this and what we do in developing a network of mobility and transportation as a way, quite frankly, to offer a amenity to their community. The return on investment for them there is the ability not to have to build parking garages, because at the end of the day, it's not building parking garages doesn't make you money. It's what happens when people park their cars and then leave the parking garage. So our goal is to reduce the number of parking garages, number of parking spaces. And we firmly believe that we have focused on a segment of the AV industry, developing the back end to support autonomous vehicles for safety and governance. I know we have some of those discussion points coming up later today, especially what's in the news, but we firmly believe that in a walk before you run approach, and that's really focused on community-based autonomous shared mobility for communities with different types of shuttles and form factors, because there are different needs within each community. So let me pause there. I know I said a lot, and that definitely wasn't a 30-second elevator pitch, but I think gives you a good idea of where we fit in the AV space.
Yeah, no, I think it would be interesting to you talked about how it was I guess it was started as part of the master plan in Lake Nona, and if you
Correct.
could kind of walk us back to those initial days and how the idea for Beep came about and how it initially kind of got started in Lake Nona.
Sure. So a little bit about who founded us and then how we ended up here and why we focused on Lake Nona. So our co-founders are actually serial entrepreneurs. So they're the Reed brothers, right? There's Kevin Reed and there's Mark Reed. I think some of you are very familiar with them. But specifically, Kevin Reed has had a number of unicorns that he has successfully, enabled over the last several years and decades. So prior to him, to Kevin and Mark starting Beep, it's actually an amazing story. Their father was a transportation guy up in Gainesville. And when Kevin had sold the last company, and that was a unicorn, his dad said, what do we focus on now? And Kevin said, what do we focus on? And his dad told them, you need to focus on these things called autonomous vehicles. This was about like 8 years ago. And so back then it's like, okay, well, what's the first thing you do? You go to Google and search autonomous vehicles. And this was really something that was in its infancy, the concept of autonomous vehicles. I think, frankly, there were a lot of promises made years ago. Some of them delivered, some of them not. And I think when they haven't been delivered, it's hurt the industry as a whole. So back then, Milton Reed is his name, said you need to start looking at this because public transit organizations are going to need another way of providing transportation because the bus drivers are aging out. Nobody wants to, really be a bus driver unless there's fantastic incentives. And if they do become a bus driver, they get their CDL and then they end up working for a private company because the CDL license is valuable to them. So when you do a startup, one of the things Kevin has always believed is you have to have an anchor client, that one client that believes and that one partner that believes and says, I want that, I want all of that, and I want that in my community. Hence the starting up of Lake Nona. So when Mark Reed ended up here, he made connections and relationships with Tavistock Development, and we developed an autonomous mobility network here. And it is still to date, Ken, the largest and longest running autonomous shuttle network in the entire country. No other community in the United States has been committed to the cause of testing autonomous vehicles like Lake Nona and Tavistock Development Group has. We've tested roughly about 7 routes here. A number of those are in operation, and we have about 10 vehicles just within this 17 square mile footprint supporting how people move around. What's really cool for us in having an anchor client here in Lake Nona is the ability now to influence what do the future generation vehicles and software look like, because we can test them here prior to scale.
No, I think that's a really important point for some of the, younger companies. One thing that we talk about is the power of positive signaling. It's, that
Absolutely.
it can create momentum, it can reduce anxiety from future buyers. And so yeah, having that initial kind of anchor, well respected, kind of client that can help alleviate concerns down the road with your second, third, fourth, fifth customers, and it even helps with talent and recruitment and everything. So, but
Absolutely.
so I guess on the other side of that, that it sounds like that was one of the most important things for some of the initial successes. But what were some of the kind of challenges with getting up and running in Lake Nona, or, the initial days of scaling? Just what were some of the early challenges that you had to overcome?
Sure. So I think it boils down to two things. Typically, I like to do things in threes, but for this, I'll commit to two. So one, there's this thing called the federal government, so we can talk about that. And the second thing is public perception and awareness. A lot, and I'll start with the public awareness and perception. So a lot of people's perceptions about autonomous vehicles are really born out of what they see, what they read, what they hear. I can tell you 9 times out of 10, 9.9 times out of 10, when we enable an autonomous shuttle service or network or bring these vehicles to a net new community, people's perceptions are slightly hesitant based off of they're reading in the news. But I can tell you 9 times out of 10, once they ride it, they experience, they understand it and develop that level of awareness, the best thing and the best compliment we get, Ken, is, oh, that actually wasn't that bad. It's not what I thought it was going to be. And then their whole entire concept of autonomous vehicles completely switches around. And that's because, again, remember, we're very focused on not an any to any approach where pick Racquel up from her office and take her to downtown Orlando. We are bringing these autonomous shuttles and mobility networks where people are comfortable and where they live. So when you put it in a community that people are familiar with, it's less scary. So one, battling that public perception and developing that a level of awareness is frankly, even after 4 years of testing these vehicles, is we still have to do in every net new community. The second is the federal government, right? These are emerging technologies, and there is some legislation, as you can probably imagine, right now being moved through DC regarding AI because of the rise in conversation on that and development of it. Autonomous vehicles, there's a lot of legislation. It really just depends on what you're talking about. There's regulation on how does the vehicle look. There's regulation on how does the vehicle operate. There are multiple components within a vehicle that enable an autonomous shuttle. One of the challenges we have as an organization is getting a level of approval, and I'm talking high level here, to enable a vehicle that looks very different than what you and I drive today. It's called novel design vehicles. And because they're very different than traditional vehicles on the road, they don't meet that level of compliance like our traditional vehicles do. So we've actually partnered with a number of tier one automotive suppliers to work through that process with the federal government, which does take time. But we're very excited when we look at the level of support that we have seen from the federal government, namely Congressman Soto, who represents us here in D9. He firmly believes in our mission because at the end of the day, it's about safety, removing vehicles off the road and congestion. And because our vehicle is electric, it's also reducing that carbon footprint as well.
Yeah, there was kind of a thread I wanted to pull on there, and just maybe how. Well, I guess it's twofold. One is, from a regulatory perspective with the uncertainty, and the other is just from the market, on how you approach like product development and research and development internally, right? And how obviously you need to continue to invest pretty heavily because it's such an emerging market and there's well-funded competitors and they're all moving a million miles a minute. But at the same time, if you don't have kind of certainty on what is going to be regulated, it's hard to shape that. So maybe if you could just kind of expand on that dynamic a little bit.
Sure. And I think, Ken, that actually boils down to and goes back to the initial reason why we were founded as an organization. So if there's any piece of advice, and this advice actually came to I'm sharing advice to you that was shared with me by Kevin Reed, one of our founders, is one, there will be peaks and valleys. And they will be peaks and valleys far more frequent than you are going to be comfortable with. Those peaks, you will have the wind in your face and you will feel like you are standing on the top of the world. 3 days later, you could be in the deepest valley and not even know whether or not you're going to get out. But you have to be committed to the cause and not continue to pivot. And so when this company was founded, frankly, 4 years ago, people thought we were crazy for focusing on such an end of the market. One, because of that level of regulation, but two, a lot of people were so focused on the robotaxi market of any to anywhere. And now we're finding some of those people are actually dialing back on some of their dialogue and some of the statements that they're making. Now focusing on geofence to areas, fixed destination, because they realize they need to fine tune it in these areas first before you start scaling and then increasing that bubble, if you will. So one, I would definitely say, stay true to your cause. You're in it for a reason, and stay true to that cause. It's so easy to want to pivot because your investors are telling you one thing, somebody else is telling you one thing, you're trying to follow industry. But with regard to that R&D, one of the reasons, again, why we were founded is the Blue Lagoon, which is our initial investor, which is Kevin Reed's organization, and Rodney Rogers, which is another major investor. They're our initial angel investors. Their whole approach is always to focus on the micro within the macro of an industry. So as an example, we're not building the vehicles, we're not building the autonomous drive systems of the vehicle that enable the vehicle to move. There are people out there who've been doing this for years, far longer than we have. What they need is our software to support the enablement of those vehicles at scale. So giving purpose to those vehicles to make sure that they are meeting. Apologize for to our UK partner. Their entry into the United States is actually via Beep, and we have aligned on what they're going to do and what we are going to do. So as a startup organization, when you find partners honestly and simply put, that are far better at you at doing something else, and then you show how you can then support and make that opportunity and that product that you're developing that much stronger.
Yeah, as you were talking about the kind of the local congressman and some of the benefits, the congestion, that's obviously one benefit of what you're bringing, but also, I think the promise with autonomous vehicles is you at scale, there's a lot of DUIs, there's a lot of distracted driver accidents, everything like that that can be prevented. I think, a third or more of accidents in general could just be prevented once this autonomous vehicle technology is at scale. And so, that could be millions of lives saved over, a couple years. But that kind of brings me to what I think the thing I'm kind of most curious to get your thoughts on is this GM Cruise incident, right? I think it was in San Francisco, maybe about a month ago, right? Where I don't know if for those that aren't aware, I think a woman got trapped under autonomous vehicle in San Francisco, and it was tragic. And now San Francisco, I think, has banned autonomous vehicles entirely from the city, right? And it's almost like any accident or any mistake from the autonomous vehicles is the equivalent of 10,000 accidents operated by humans. And the potential benefit that the technology can provide is we won't ever get there if we don't have if we don't have the appetite for risk. And so I guess maybe that's my question is, have we lost our appetite for risk? How do you tend to navigate these kind of complexities, given that you're operating in this space?
A lot of that work can honestly starts before you're ever put in a situation where the industry as a whole is facing a challenge. So what do I mean by that? We continually engage day in and day out with the communities that we operate in, with our partners and clients where we have projects, and also our federal leaders, right, that continue to support our causes in Washington. And when I say a lot of that starts at the very beginning and continually, we have already, from the very beginning, before this even happened, really outlined for our partners, and again, to those partners are the full gamut, what I just mentioned, continually told them from the beginning, our approach is materially different because insert XXXXX. Consistency in messaging is incredibly important because in times when it matters, you then go back to those stakeholders that I mentioned and say, hey, remember when we said X, Y, and Z? Well, this is why, right? And for me, of course, messaging is incredibly important for all those stakeholders, for our community members, in those areas that we have projects in, because we can then go back and remind them, remember when we said this? The reason this won't happen is because of this. Oh, okay, yeah, that's right, I remember. Our level of engagement as well with our stakeholders starts before our vehicles even get there on the ground. And before we even start picking up passengers, we have hosted so many visits here in the office to develop that level of awareness of exactly what I talked about. We're materially different because here's how we do it. Here's how we ensure safety. And so if there's one piece of advice I have for startups, find your champions. And when you find your champions aren't just your clients who are helping pay your bills, who are, your investors and your funders. Your champions are, at the end of the day, the people who will say, oh yeah, they're not like them because of this. Oh yeah, they're so different. Oh yeah, they have all of this to make sure that that doesn't happen. When you find champions off the bat, they matter in times of challenge, and they will cheerlead even louder for you and when you have victories within your organization.
Yeah, but I guess I'm seeing, you mentioned AI earlier and how that's being regulated. You could kind of draw parallels where, yes,
Absolutely.
the extremes and the kind of bad actors in a space, and yeah, there's obviously some very bad ways that AI can be used, but if it tends to be, regulated or banned in a way that you can't ever use it in developing therapeutics or, you
Mhm.
know, developing the right ways to identify cancer or things like that, then we're not going to be able to get there. And so, I mean, maybe the other point that I'm kind of maybe the other point that I'm getting at is that if you're an early stage company and you're selling into these more regulated industries, just the importance of communications and marketing in your messaging and being able to communicate that in stakeholder management. Is that fair?
That's, you could not be more spot on, and I'll even give it a larger umbrella. I'll use the word engagement. Engagement needs to happen over and over and over again. And it often within organizations does fall within marketing and communications. But for me, I like to go a deeper level. If you're continually engaging on a regular basis, I always use the cup is always full approach, right? Your cup with your partners, your clients, your stakeholders should always be full. I mean, overflowing to the point where you can't hold any more within that cup, because there's going to come a time where you're going to have to empty some of that cup. But for your partners, your clients, your customers, your funders, they know you're always there for the good. That gives them the faith that you're going to be there in the times where it's bad and it's challenging, and it's super, super challenging. So one thing I would say is, again, develop those champions and engage regularly. I mean, it's something like within sales, for each and every single one of our clients, our customers and project areas, I know every little nuance about their community that has nothing to do with the project that we're enabling, because it shows that I am committed to understanding their community as a whole, which shows our partners, oh, Raquel really gets it. She's committed to our community and what they're providing us to support it.
And I mean, the counter to that is that makes it extremely difficult to scale at the right velocity, right? There's I think, one of the challenges in your space is you're dealing with a lot of hyper local regulations and hyper local stakeholder involvement. And so being able to bring this nationally or to different markets, or you mentioned going to Yellowstone, those are almost entirely unique sales in themselves. It's not necessarily a playbook. Or are there things that you can take region to region?
Absolutely. And scale is always a big one for us. And being transparent, there's only one Raquel within the organization. There's only one Mark. There's only one Joe. You have to develop your stand-ins and your representatives who can always be there when you can't be there. So one approach that I've always done is, again, develop those community ambassadors that I can call in California from here, from Florida, to say, hey, need your assistance with this. We have a community engagement event. And so what you're essentially doing is developing pockets of support. So you don't have to be there all the time, but you trust those to carry on your message and achieve the objectives that you have laid out. So creating those pockets is incredibly important. One other thing that I would definitely stress to startups, and Ken, you touched on this, is if something bad is happening with an industry that you're focused on, whether it's pharmaceuticals or therapy or whatever it is, know your industry through and through. And here's an easy step. After this Zoom, what I highly suggest for every single one of you on this call is set up a Google alert for your industry. Set up a Google alert for who you perceive your competitors to be, because what that allows you to do is see where you fall in market and see who others in market are doing. And that allows you then to communicate your differentiation within the industry that you're focused on.
Yeah, and I think, some of this might seem outside of the box for some of the for some other companies, but it's, my understanding of like the local regulations and that kind of model is, I mean, Uber had to go through something very similar. Lemonade, which is a insurance carrier, they had to do the same thing in different markets. It's there is a there is challenge in any kind of regulated industry being able to scale into different markets.
Ken, I would definitely say to that, and I'm not going to downplay that there is a level of local regulation and memorandum of understanding that you need to develop with the partners where we enable these projects. Absolutely accurate. I would say that, again, that stakeholder engagement is something we do at the onset. The other thing is that makes us materially different from others in industry is we are coming into communities because we are essentially welcomed into the communities by those we're doing projects with. So as an example, in North Carolina, we have already had 2 projects. We're underway on our second in North Carolina. North Carolina DOT says, this is a use case we want to test. These are the goals we want to achieve. And then they essentially say, hey, okay, beep. This is UNC Charlotte. UNC Charlotte, this is beep. Beep and UNC Charlotte work together to enable the autonomous vehicles here on campus. We'll work together to ensure you have that level of compliance of what does the university require. And then our North Carolina DOT counterpart says, we'll make sure that everything's taken care of and you're in compliance of everything on the state level. At the end of the day, we're still heavily regulated by the federal government, but that level of compliance on the local level is, dare I say, knock on wood, easier for us, mainly because we are partnering directly with the communities and where we have where we're doing those projects.
Yeah. So you've also hit a little bit on what you're doing in Orlando, but maybe we can just kind of shift gears there. For those that don't know, talk about how I guess you're in Lake Nona, but outside of Lake Nona, I think you're launched in a couple different areas. So if you could just kind of give a summary of your footprint within Central Florida and where you're planning on next.
Sure. So I'll start macro and then go micro into Florida. I'll flip flop it a little bit, Ken.
Perfect.
So we have experience testing these autonomous vehicles in 6 states across the country, roughly about 24 communities around the United States. When you look at differentiating yourself in market, each and every single one of those communities for us is a different use case, a different type of testimonial, so that we can then go into another community and say, oh, city X, you want to connect all of that. We've done similar projects such as these 4 that are very similar to yours, right? It's about finding similarities and parallels with net new project areas. So as I mentioned, 6 states, roughly about 24 communities. We have projects currently in California, Florida, North Carolina, and Georgia. And so when I focus in a little bit more on Florida, we have active projects, as you know, in Lake Nona, in the Port St. Lucie area with another master plan community called Tradition. We also have a project first funded in the state of Florida by Florida Department of Transportation in Altamont Springs. We also have a 6-month project that we're doing in partnership with City of Orlando and with Lynx. And we're in the process as well of developing the first and the largest autonomous shuttle network in Jacksonville with the Jacksonville Transportation Authority. We've also had projects on the west coast of Florida with Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority, roughly about 3 states and 3 communities there. And also have had a project in Miami, right at Zoo Miami, which enabled transportation throughout their parking lots.
I guess the other thing I wanted to ask with regards to Orlando is, there a lot of Orlando early stage companies kind of struggle to raise capital, and you hit on this a little bit in your founding story, but also you've raised from the likes of Intel and TDF, and so what do you think has enabled kind of Beep's ability to raise meaningful amounts of capital from firms like that outside the region?
Sure. So 2 things I would say to that. One, a lot of our investment has come, frankly, from our the relationships. Again, everything is relationship based. I hope that's one thing that everybody pulls away from this. Is from our initial founders, Kevin Reed and Rodney Rogers, as part of their initial venture. So a lot of that was and is relationship based because they have a track record of delivering, companies that can scale because of their approach, again focused on the micro within the macro of an industry. So frankly, that's where we've been able to get a lot of our pull when it comes to the likes of Intel Capital, ABS Capital, TDF Ventures. What I would say to everybody, when you're looking for investors are great. And I think, Ken, you had actually touched on this in an event that we were at a couple months ago or a couple years ago, is when you look at strategic investments, money is great. And it's always great for every startup. But what is more valuable than the money, frankly, is the ability for that investor and that funder to give you guidance and leverage on how to scale and make their investment worthwhile. So here's what I mean by that. So one of the reasons that Intel Capital was incredibly interested in us and why we were interested in Intel Capital is because when you look at their other portfolio companies, there were other companies within their portfolio that were of value to us to partner with. So when they invested in us, we've already received 2 rounds of funding from them. We were very interested in partnering with Mobileye. Mobileye is one of the leading autonomous drive system companies in the world. They have projects all around the world. And we actually have a partnership with Mobileye to develop next generation vehicles, which then enables that scale that Ken, that you were alluding to. So when you look at investors, look at, yes, they are money. They're there to help your cause, but make sure that you're receiving that money with the backing of guidance and access to other portfolio companies that can give you leverage to scale.
Awesome. I want to try to wrap up with a couple final questions and then open it up. I think I'm just curious to get your thoughts on this. Where do you think we are on the autonomous vehicle journey just within the market? When do you think that this becomes more ubiquitous in all of our lives?
Sure. So when does it become more ubiquitous within our lives? What's interesting is when you look at a lot of the vehicles that are coming out on the road today, they have assisted driving technology, right? You drive in a car and then you let go for a little bit, or you just get distracted, right? And then the vehicle starts coming back, right? That's lane assist. That is a form and function of autonomous vehicles already. The automatic braking, you ever drive in a rental car and then all of a sudden you fall too close to, why is the vehicle stopping? My foot's not on the brake, it's on the gas. Another form of assisted driving technology, which underpins autonomous drive systems. So a lot of what we already experience today does already have some level of automation. When you look at scaling what we do, I can tell you, Ken, and to others on this call, within the next 2 years, you're going to have vehicles that go faster. And when I say faster, faster than what we do today, I'm not talking 70 miles per hour on a highway on Florida Turnpike. I'm talking 35, maybe even 40 miles per hour within communities. Our goal is to get people out of their cars. At the end of the day, when you look at communities like Lake Nona and master plan communities, there's been a tremendous shift in the workforce, which is supporting the need then again for community-based transit, which can then be supported by autonomous vehicles. Lake Nona, as an example, 35% of the people who live here work from home. The worst asset they have that loses the most money for them is a car that sits in their driveway. So now Lake Nona, people who live here can go down to one vehicle because one person's working from home, and then they use the network to be able to enable it. That's where you're going to start to see scale. For the industry as a whole, I would say in the next 2 years, you're going to see more public transit agencies embracing shared autonomous vehicles. Shared is what we do. It's not a one-to-one scenario, right? Replace one vehicle with an autonomous vehicle. You will see public entities like transit organizations really leaning in a lot more. You might not hear it. We hear it a lot because we're within industry. You'll also start to see a lot of industry as a whole beyond BEEP focus now on more controlled geofenced areas because of everything that's happening now. They want to show that they're containing the operation with an area where they know they can do it safely, and frankly, ensure that they can address any issues with any software that they may encounter while testing.
Where do you see Beep in the next 5 to 10 years, or what is the vision for Beep in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, if I knew where BEEP was going to be in 5 to 10 years, I would be playing the lotto. I would take that same crystal ball and get the winning lotto numbers. For us as an organization, you will definitely see, I'll even say 5 years, Ken. I don't think anybody in the autonomous vehicle industry can tell you where they're going to be in 10 years because of many outside factors. We encountered some of those, right, with some of the things happening in industry right now. Within the next 5 years, though, you'll definitely see more larger scale, what I'll call projects with autonomous vehicles that are beyond a 1 to 2 to 3 vehicle project. You're going to start to see in the next 2 years, as an example, Jacksonville Transportation Authority, the first public entity to enable 15 autonomous vehicles within a geo-fenced area. That's 2 years. Imagine what 5 years is going to be. Typically, what we have found within industry is once one type or what I'll call sales vertical starts to do it, everybody wants to follow. They never want to be the first, but they always want to be following, because they want someone to be able to tread, pave the path for them, if you will. So I firmly believe you're going to see more transit organizations embracing autonomous technology to support those community-based movement that they need, and the longer hauls are still going to be handled, frankly, by those legacy bus drivers. There will always be a need for that. I will say for us as an organization, even within 2 years, you'll start to see automotive industrial grade shuttles start to come out, and those will be the higher, faster speeds. And the reason that's critically important for scale for us is because those will be made by tier 1 automotive grade suppliers that supply the parts and components for the vehicles that we drive today. So Ventilar Automotive, as an example, is one of our partners that supplies a lot of the engines, the steel frames, the steel tubular design of Mercedes-Benz and Ford. They'll use those same parts and components to build our vehicles that we are partnering with them. So larger scale deployments, more within a fleet than just beyond the onesies and twosies.
Okay, that exciting. Okay, well, how about we open it up? Maybe I'll just shut up here and see if anybody has any questions who's on the call.
Either I bored everyone to death or they don't have any questions.
Actually, Racquel, I have a question. This is David Adelson. Good morning, and thank you so much for taking the time this morning with all of us, and really appreciate it. Incredibly insightful, and it's been a pleasure to watch Beep grow in Lake Nona and Creative Village, and thank you for what you do for Orlando. I am curious to know, and obviously you don't have to provide too much details, but I am a little curious to understand the business model of Beep. And how you work with customers that want to have your services.
Sure. David, that's actually a question that we get asked a lot. What is the business model? How do you make money, right? So when you look at Beep, our model is very unique and different from, I'll use Uber as an example, or the robo-taxi market, because when we go under contract and when we partner, we're very much a B2B model. So as an example, I'll use Lake Nona as an example. Beep contracts with Tavistock Development Group and Lake Nona, which then is another B2C angle, because then we're providing a service for the community. So we don't collect fares from the end user. Our business model is direct partnership with the, I'll call it, owner and entity to enable a service within a community. Transit agencies do this all the time. They contract out with vendors to support their existing offerings, right? I'll call them. And we are so they contract directly with a public transit agency to support a service. We're similar, definitely in that regard, but different in that we use a different type of form factor. And type of vehicle, and the back-end software that we develop. There's another angle to that, which we really didn't talk a lot about, but when you look at public transit organizations, JTA, as an example, has 80 legacy I'll call them monitoring systems that we need to integrate into our monitoring software so that we can enable monitoring of our vehicles within what they use today. So we are a very, David, B2B model with a touch of B2C.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Anybody have any other questions? Going once, going twice. Sold to me. Okay. Well, no, Racquel, thank you. I echo David's comments. It's obviously, you're doing a lot of great stuff for the community, and it's one of the cooler companies that we see on a day-to-day basis, and it's awesome to watch you all grow and increase your footprint throughout Orlando and throughout the state. So we're really excited to continue watching you grow and being a part of it however we can. So
we're excited to be part of the Orlando story, and Ken and David, definitely always appreciate the support locally. And I know, Ken, one of the questions you had is how has Orlando really helped us establish ourselves as an organization? And it's again finding those cheerleaders who can really support what you're doing is critically important. The other thing I would say to startups looking for those I'll call legacy clients or cornerstone clients, find that one and nurture and foster that one like it's your baby, because if your baby doesn't believe in you, good luck on finding others in your industry. to support that and go to bat for you and essentially sell for you. When you think about creating other babies, right, other sales verticals, don't try to do the same thing with the same, what I'll call sales vertical. So yes, having multiple master plan communities as a use case is incredibly important. And of course, we love having more master plan communities as part of our testimonial, but start to differentiate yourself. And so for what we have done as an organization, as an example, is how do we start then applying this type of emerging technology to university campuses? Therefore, when another university comes to us and they ask us, have you ever done this at a campus before? We can say, in fact, look at UNC Charlotte. That is a university use case. Look for different use cases to diversify your development, your clients, your portfolio, because that at the end of the day gives you the ability to call up that particular use case and that client where you did something materially different and say, hey, I've got a client call. Could you just tell them what we did for you? And there is no better testimony than coming direct for a client. Take that. I mean, that is worth their initial investment and then some into your project and organization.
From an investor's point of view, I couldn't agree more with that either. Always the best to hear it directly from the customers. So, okay. Well, again, Racquel, this was awesome. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to continue watching you all grow and staying in touch.
Sure, appreciate it. We actually have a software announcement coming tomorrow, so this is really, really exciting for us too. And it's really going to help us scale the software arm of our organization as well. So lots of growth, lots of high growth in the next couple of years for us. So excited to be here.
Awesome. All right, thank you, Racquel.
All right, have a great one. Bye-bye.